Have you ever heard of 11? That girl, raised in a lab, with powers that defied logic, science, and reality itself. But what no one ever told you is that her story didn't begin in fiction. It came from real experiments, from secret CIA files, from a project called Stargate, where humans were trained to spy with their minds, to see places they had never been, to read thoughts, to kill with a stare. This happened in the United States, funded with millions of dollars. And you've never heard about it? For one simple reason: they didn't want you to know. The 1970s. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union was at its peak. But it wasn't just a race for bombs. It was a race for total control over the human mind. When the CIA discovered that the Soviets were testing psychic phenomena, they didn't hesitate. They wanted to do the same, or better. It started like this. A group of scientists, former military officers, and even psychics was brought together in hidden labs. And from there, something was born. A project that would later be known as Project Stargate. The goal? To create a new kind of soldier, the psychic warrior. That wasn't the only secret project happening at the time. The US government had already tried using drugs and psychological torture to control people, in Cultra. But in Stargate, the focus was different. They wanted to see the invisible, to read what no one was saying, to see across miles, using nothing but the mind. And this is where things start to look a lot like Stranger Things. Because the reports talk about hidden laboratories, experiments on children, and powers that defy everything science says is possible. Project Stargate wasn't just a theory, it was real, it was funded, it was documented, and it lasted nearly 25 years. But the most shocking part was what these experiments began to reveal. At Fort Meade Air Force Base in Maryland, dozens of trained individuals started to see distant places. That's right, using only their minds. The technique was called remote viewing. An ordinary person would receive a sealed envelope. Inside, the coordinates of a secret location somewhere in the world. They would sit down, close their eyes, and begin to describe what they saw. Mountains, structures, landing strips. And the worst part? They were accurate. One of the most well-known names was Joseph McMonigle. He was a military psychic spy, awarded a medal for his classified service. In one of his most famous sessions, McMonigle described the layout of a secret Soviet nuclear submarine base with pinpoint precision, years before spy satellites confirmed it. Another legendary name, Ingo Swann. He claimed to see places beyond Earth itself. In one test, he described lunar craters invisible from Earth that would only be confirmed years later by space probes. Target, coordinate X23, viewer 001. Report, I see a curved metal structure, 3 towers, a shadow over the sea. Accuracy, 89%, confirmed by satellite. If this sounds like fiction, that's because it became fiction. Stranger Things was born from this idea. A world where the government trained children to access hidden dimensions, where the mind could open portals, where trauma became power. And the most terrifying part? All of it was inspired by real events. But in real life, there were no monsters on the other side. There were people. People willing to cross any line in the name of power. But if Project Stargate was so secret, why was it shut down, or was it? Officially, Project Stargate was shut down in 1995. The US government claimed that, after years of experiments, remote viewing was inconclusive and had no real strategic value. But you know what that really means? That the military never spoke publicly about it again. That thousands of documents were filed away, redacted, or erased. And to this day, no one knows what was done with all that psychic knowledge. Years later, new reports began to surface of a project even darker, a project that didn't use adults, but children. This project was never acknowledged by the government, but it became known as the Montauk Project. According to whistleblowers, children were taken to a base in New York. They were subjected to electric shocks, isolation, sensory deprivation, all of it designed to awaken abilities like telepathy, telekinesis, time manipulation, even interdimensional travel. That is exactly the story that inspired Stranger Things. In fact, the original name of the series wasn't Stranger Things. It was Montauk. The name only changed due to legal pressure, but the content stayed the same. The most terrifying part is that many of those involved never denied the reports. On the contrary, some former military officials claimed the experiments continued in private facilities, far from the eyes of Congress, and that what started as Stargate evolved into something far more advanced and far more dangerous. They said they were training the next generation of soldiers, but at what cost? How many children were sacrificed in the process? How many lives were shattered in the name of a power no one fully understood? And what would happen if that power fell into the wrong hands? Stranger Things might be just a show, but its foundation is far more real than you think. And what if everything you've just seen isn't a theory at all? What if, right now, there are still hidden facilities where people are being trained to use the mind as a weapon? Project Stargate was shut down, but the knowledge didn't disappear. It simply left the public eye and sank into the shadows. What Stranger Things does is tell the truth in a safe way, wrapped in fiction. But behind that girl with the bleeding nose and those cold, soulless scientists are echoes of reality. Because Eleven's story might be the story of someone who never had a voice, of a real child, locked in a white room, wires on their head, and a mind forced to open portals that should never have existed. In the end, maybe the real question isn't, did this happen? But what's still happening without us knowing? Because when the government controls reality, the truth becomes the greatest secret of all. The human mind is the most uncharted territory in history, and someone is trying to conquer it. You've just uncovered Project Stargate, but the real question is, what else have they hidden? If this left you wondering, if you believe the world is darker than it seems, subscribe, because the next video goes even deeper.